Arrivals. As Arax lunged, Tariq dove aside, narrowly avoiding the charge. The ram's huge horns struck the stone slab with the force of an earthquake. Chunks of rock exploded out, and a web of cracks spread across the hard surface. The ledge vibrated beneath Maylin's feet. Tariq pulled his sword out, and his otter appeared with a flash. Arax sprang again, but this time Tariq flipped gracefully out of the way. Maylin surveyed the battleground. The ledge was very wide where they currently stood, and ran more or less level before it tapered to nothing in front of them. Beyond the lip of the ledge, a sheer drop awaited. With a burst of light, Barlow released Jules. The grizzly bear slammed into Arax's rear leg, sliding the ram sideways and forcing him to quick-step to avoid stumbling. Arax kicked out sharply and caught the bear with a glancing blow from his huge hooves that sent Jules tumbling along the ledge. Maylin raced back to check out the newcomers Arax had been so angry about. Hopefully Uraza was bringing reinforcements. A second detachment of greencloaks would come in handy against the giant ram. Maylin curved around the massive slab and peered up the rocky slope. 11 people were coming in her direction from only a short distance away. None wore green cloaks, though several had spirit animals. A Niloan girl ran alongside a leopard, springing lightly among the rocks. The magnificent leopard moved with that peculiar combination of grace and power unique to big cats. The girl was lithe, tall for her age, and advanced confidently. There was a subtle synchronization to their movements, almost as if they were influenced by the same secret music. It had to be Uraza and her partner. Maylin also saw a baboon, a wolverine, a cougar, a jackal, and an Amayan condor with widespread wings. She had seen all of these creatures in Zhongyi's menageries, but watching them charge down the slope toward her was a different experience than viewing them in a pen or a cage. "They aren't greencloaks," Maylin called.
"This wasn't an ambush," Tariq yelled to Arax. "These newcomers have been sent by our enemies." The ram charged him again, and Tariq dodged to one side. There was an opening where he could have used his sword, but he didn't take a swing.
"You're all here for the same purpose," Arax raged. "You want to steal my granite ram."
Roland, Connor, and Monty dashed over to Maylin, while Barlow and Tariq confronted Arax.
"It's Zarif!"
Roland cried. The man with the sculpted beard raised his head and saluted. A jackal ran near him.
"We meet again,"
Zarif called, moving closer.
"I like the colour of your cloak, Roland." "Are you here to fight us?"
Roland asked.
"Not if you join us,"
Zarif replied with a confident laugh.
"Silver, find the talisman."
A vampire bat flashed out from the wrist of one of the women. She clutched it in both hands, eyes closed. A moment later, her eyes opened. Were they darker? "Done," she said.
"Go get it,"
Zarif said.
"The rest of us will mop up the mess."
The woman headed off while the rest of the group scrambled closer.
"Abeke!"
Maylin called to the dark-skinned girl.
"We've been searching for you. Why are you helping them?"
"She wants Uraza on the right side of the fight this time," said the boy rushing alongside the wolverine. "It's time for the greencloaks to stop controlling the world."
Hackles raised, Brigand growled. Uraza snarled right back at him. The savage tension between the two beasts made Maylin ready her quarterstaff.
"Back up,"
Monty advised, retreating behind the sheltering slab.
"They're coming down at us. Keep out of sight for as long as possible. Make them fight on level ground."
He was right. Maylin backed up with the others, her stomach fluttering nervously. She had never engaged in actual combat before. Even the fight with the Raven warrior had been a contest with set rules. How would she fare with her life on the line? How dirty might these opponents fight? Maylin noticed G scraping at a weed that protruded from a crack.
"G, are you going to help me like how Lumio helps Tariq? We're in trouble. I could use whatever power you can lend me."
The panda gave her a neutral stare, then picked at the weed again. Maylin looked away in disgust. Connor repeatedly shifted his weight from one foot to the other, axe clutched tightly, his knuckles white. Brigand paced beside him, his fur upright.
"You'll do fine,"
Maylin told Connor.
He glanced over with a queasy smile. "I've chopped a lot of wood. If they hold really still, I'll do great." Mei Lin gave a surprised laugh. It took courage to joke at a time like this.
Roland stared at the sky.
Essex circled high above. "Are you going to help?" he called, obviously frustrated.
Glancing over her shoulder, Mei Lin saw Barlow on the ground below Arax, trying to avoid the stomp of his massive hooves. Tariq and Jules closed in to assist. When she turned back, an Amayan man sped around the edge of the slab astride a buffalo. She and the others dove out of the way as more enemies dashed into view. Mei Lin was only partially aware of the surrounding tumult. Brigand snapping at the underside of the buffalo, Connor holding a mountain goat back with wide sweeps of his axe, Roland retreating while brandishing his dagger, Monty hurling a stone with a sling. Her primary attention was reserved for the woman approaching boldly beside a cougar. Mei Lin crouched into her fighting stance. Ji raised up on her hind legs beside her. Clutching a spear, the woman sprang toward Mei Lin, leaping farther than seemed possible, lips peeled back in a hateful grimace. Mei Lin used her quarterstaff to bat away the spearhead, then spun and cracked the woman on the side of her skull. She crashed to the ground in a boneless sprawl. Mei Lin prepared to face the vengeance of the mountain lion. Coiled to pounce, the cougar stared at her panda. The big cat maintained the same pose for several seconds. On her hind legs, Ji walked toward the mesmerized mountain lion and placed her paws at either side of its head. The cougar's eyes drooped, and it curled on the ground, soundly asleep. "Better than nothing," Mei Lin murmured, scanning the area. Barlow was helping Tariq lead the ram back along the ledge toward the new enemies. Mei Lin approved of the strategy. Let the newcomers help tangle with the biggest threat. Brigand had rejoined Connor. An Amayan man lay on the ground near them, and his mountain goat was retreating from teeth and axe. Monty wrestled with a Zhongese woman whose agile mongoose tussled with Scrubber. He looked overmatched. Mei Lin's father had warned that there was little room for sportsmanship on the battlefield. When survival was in question, you fought hard and you seized every advantage, because your enemy was sure to do the same. So Mei Lin ran to Monty, bashed the woman on the back of her head, and then clubbed the mongoose. The buffalo charged Arax. Barlow and Tariq sprang clear. Though big and strong, the buffalo looked pathetic compared to the hulking ram. An Amayan man ran behind, shouting for his buffalo to stop. Ram and buffalo came together head to head with a sickening crunch. The buffalo flopped backward, disgustingly crumpled, and the man screamed. Essex screeched overhead. Looking up, Mei Lin saw Abeke and Uraza perched atop the stone slab. Harassed by Essex, Abeke tried to aim her bow down at the skirmish. The falcon dove in to disrupt her shot, talons clawing at the girl's hands. Uraza snarled, batting at the bird with lethal paws. Essex shrieked again. "No, Abeke!" Mei Lin called. "You're fighting for the wrong side!" Abeke tried to shoot Essex, but narrowly missed. Mei Lin looked for Ji, and found the panda carefully climbing the least steep edge of the slab where Abeke perched, down at the far side. Tariq was locked in sword-to-sword combat with Zarif. Tariq moved like an acrobat, twisting and leaping with vicious grace. But Zarif seemed up to the challenge, deflecting every blow and attacking with astounding speed. "Mei Lin, look out!" Monty warned. Mei Lin pivoted just in time to dodge a sword thrust from the boy with the wolverine. His saber had a gleaming blade and a gilded hilt. Mei Lin tried to undercut his legs with her quarterstaff, but he jumped the attempt and once again very nearly stabbed her. As she tried to attack with her quarterstaff, he chopped it in half, and when she tried to fight with one half in each hand, he quickly shortened both halves with precise strokes. He was skilled and quick, and Mei Lin doubted whether she could stand against him even if she had a sword. Backing away, Mei Lin pulled out her club. It was thicker and shorter than the quarterstaff, and banded with iron. Roland came flying out of nowhere with his dagger, but the skillful boy parried the attack and kicked him away. The wolverine got hold of Roland's arm and shook it viciously. "You have talent,"
the boy said to Maylin. "It's a shame you fight against us."
"Your people are invading my homeland," Maylin growled.
"It's a compliment," the boy said. "We admire Zhong. We dream of a better Zhong, free from the oppression of the green cloaks." Maylin attacked with her club. He dodged one lightning-fast blow, blocked another, then took the offensive. Maylin backed away, barely holding her own in the onslaught. When he came with an overhanded stroke, she was so busy deflecting it that she never saw the kick that swept her feet out from under her. Standing over Maylin, saber poised to strike, the boy grinned. "Let me suggest that you yield."
Chapter 17. Granite Ram. From her position on the stone wall, Abeke had a clear view of the battle. Down below, Zerif duelled a tall green cloak who moved in ways she had never imagined, twirling and flipping without ever mishandling his sword. Shane fought a Zhongyi's girl who was putting up surprising resistance, considering how young and small she looked. Abeke wanted to help him with her bow, but the pesky falcon kept diving at her, sharp talons threatening her bowstring. Abeke had already wasted 2 arrows trying to hit the bird at close range. Uraza gave a low growl. Abeke thought she understood what the leopard wanted. Crouching low, Abeke held her bow near Uraza, nocked an arrow, and aimed downward again. When the falcon flew near, Abeke leaned away and Uraza jumped straight up, catching a wing in her jaws. The falcon struggled for a moment, but after a threatening rumble from Uraza, the bird went limp. Abeke set the arrow to the string again and bent her bow. It would probably help most if she put an arrow through the green cloak fighting Zerif, or she could drop the big guy with the bear. Of course, for now he was distracting Arax, so she should probably leave him alone. The ram had already crushed the buffalo and trampled Neil along with his baboon. As she searched for a target, the bow trembled in her hand. Did she want to shoot a green cloak? She had come here committed to help Zerif and Shane get the talisman. But none of this felt right. The Zhongyi's girl had a panda, the boy with the axe had a wolf, and the gerfalcon that had challenged her. Was it Essex? She was up against the other members of the Four Fallen. So, who was on the wrong side? Shane and Zerif wanted her to stand with them. Well, truthfully, they wanted Uraza. Abeke frowned. Nobody had shown much interest in her until the leopard showed up. Paralyzed with indecision, Abeke was losing her chance to take action. The panda approached her unhurriedly from along the top of the high slab, its striking silver eyes set in the black furry mask. It had to be G, from the stories. Tales told by the fire were coming to life all around her. Green cloaks, Arax the ram, the Four Fallen. When this new story was told, would she be a hero or a villain? With the falcon still gripped in her mouth, Uraza watched the panda approach. She looked ridiculous atop the wall, too round and ungainly to cross the thin ridge. Abeke turned her bow toward it. Uraza looked back at Abeke and growled low in her throat without releasing the falcon. Abeke immediately lowered her weapon. Uraza had never scolded her that blatantly before. The panda drew near and sniffed Uraza. The leopard released the falcon, which leaped from the slab and took flight. Uraza must have held the bird very gently, because its wing was undamaged. Those powerful jaws could have torn the wing clean off, had Uraza desired. Uraza touched noses with G, then looked up at Abeke and made a purring sound. "You recognize G?" Abeke asked. Uraza stared intensely at her with those bright violet eyes. For once, Abeke felt deeply unsure about what the leopard wanted. Abeke squeezed her bow. If she didn't want to actually hurt any of the green cloaks, perhaps her safest bet was to run for the talisman. It was why they had come. If she could get it away from here, that might end this bloodshed. Down below, Shane stood over the Zhongyi's girl, his blade poised to strike. She was on the ground, defenseless. Then, a boy with Shane's wolverine dangling from his arm tackled Shane from behind. Abeke gasped. Blindsided by the attack, Shane went down hard and lost hold of his blade. One of his legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. The girl picked up the sword and held it threateningly. Looking woozy, Shane called off the wolverine. "We won't fight Ji," Abeke told Uraza, "but please, don't let them hurt Shane." Uraza turned and sprang from the wall with a mighty roar. It was a fairly long drop, much farther than Abeke would willingly attempt. Uraza pinned the Zhongyi's girl down with one paw and the Amayan boy with the other. The girl looked momentarily terrified, but when Uraza fended off a fresh attack from Shane's wolverine with a loud snarl, she glanced up at Abeke. Holding her eyes, Abeke nodded gravely. The girl's expression transformed to one of bewilderment. Abeke scanned the sky for Essex and caught sight of the falcon hovering above the main ledge at the point where it tapered down to nothing against the cliff face. Below the falcon, Silver stood near the edge, watching as her bat fluttered around a small rock shelf well beyond the ledge. She appeared to be stalled. The talisman was probably out of reach, over by the bat. Nobody down below seemed to notice Silver. Bow in hand, Abeke dashed along the top of the wall. If she joined Silver, perhaps they could reach the talisman quickly and escape. Abeke climbed down the least sheer face of the slab she could find, scraping her arms and legs in her haste, and falling the last third of the way. She landed well on the main ledge, and found her leopard waiting. "We have to get that talisman," Abeke said, running along the ledge at top speed. Up ahead, the falcon snatched the bat out of the air. Silver screamed, extending her arms toward her spirit animal. After brutally shaking the bat, the falcon let go, and it fell limply, down, down, until it was out of sight. Silver dropped to her knees and peered over the brink, wailing and calling out for it. Abeke kept sprinting. Essex flew to the small shelf beyond the ledge where the bat had fluttered. Abeke could now see that on the little shelf was a rough stone box formed by stacking hefty blocks. The falcon pecked and clawed at it, but couldn't open it.
"Keep away from there,"
Arax bellowed, his great voice filling the mountainside with its echoes.
"Begone, thieves and deceivers."
With a sound like a mighty river, a terrible wind blasted along the ledge. It hit Abeke from behind, pushing her forward. Essex was hurled from the shelf and spiraled out of control, striking the wall of the cliff again and again before finding refuge in a sheltered nook. Abeke remembered Zerif warning that Arax could influence the wind. But a rain dancer normally had to labor for days to influence the weather. Abeke had not expected instant gales conjured out of nothing. The violent currents of the wind shifted unpredictably, forcing Abeke to adjust to keep from falling. Uraza ran beside her, fur flattened by the gusts. Finally, Abeke reached Silver. "How's the bat?" she asked. "Boku landed on a skinny perch way down there," Silver replied, looking over the side with panicked grief. "He's hurt." Abeke considered the shelf with the stone box. It was higher than their present position, and well beyond where the big ledge ended. She noticed some minor ledges and outcroppings in between. She looked at Uraza. "Think I can make it?" Uraza nudged her encouragingly. Abeke's senses grew sharper. She was drawing in Uraza's perception, experiencing her power. As she saw the mountainside in greater relief, more handholds and footholds became evident. Confidence welled up inside. She laid down her bow and settled into a crouch. The wind was blowing at her back. The nearest ledge was well beyond the range a normal person could reach with a jump. But with Uraza's support, Abeke was no normal person. She ran and jumped, the wind boosting her leap, and skipped off the targeted ledge to a smaller one. She only touched the next ledge once, then stretched forward and clung to a knobby outcropping with both arms, earning stinging scrapes from her wrists to her elbows. The wind howled and swirled around her. Abeke hoisted herself atop the outcropping and sprang again. This time the wind slowed her, and even with the extra power in her leap, she barely caught her next handhold. Abeke steeled herself not to look below. She knew there was nothing but a sheer drop beneath her. With the deafening wind pushing against her, Abeke pulled herself up. She edged along the thin ledge as far as she could before a final jump brought her to the shelf with the box.
"No," RX boomed. "No, no, 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 no!"
The wind redoubled in force, and the entire mountainside shuddered. Staying low and leaning into the gale, Abeke fought her way to the box. Pushing with all of her might, groaning as she adjusted for maximum leverage, Abeke toppled the weighty lid. Inside, she found a granite carving of a ram, attached to a thin iron chain. The wind abated, but the mountainside quaked harder. Some of the nearby ledges and outcrops crumbled away, plummeting down the sheer face into the deep valley below. Praying that the talisman would somehow aid her, Abeke slipped the chain over her head. Abeke wobbled. The shelf was splitting and cracking underfoot. The whole cliff shook harder than ever. Wearing the granite ram made her feel no different, and many of the ledges she had used to get here were gone. But with rocks hailing down from above, and with the rock beneath her tearing away from the cliff, she had no choice but to jump. She didn't feel the power of the talisman until she sprang, but then it was as though the strength Uraza gave her had been increased fourfold. The leap propelled her farther than she could have hoped. As the shelf tumbled away behind her, she soared an exhilarating distance through the air. But the jump still wasn't long enough to return to the main ledge, and the other footholds had crumbled. As she began to curve downward, Abeke spotted an indentation in the face of the cliff, just large enough that she might find some purchase. Kicking off of the indentation, she gained some height, and with a final push off a meager stone lip, Abeke landed back on the big ledge beside Uraza. "Incredible!" Silver marveled. As the wind slackened, the falcon took flight again. Silver began the dangerous climb down to her bat. Abeke picked up her bow and turned her attention to Arax. The battle with the ram was moving in her direction. Several people and animals were no longer standing, and Arax fought those that remained with renewed vigor. As Abeke watched, Arax bashed the grizzly bear with his huge horns and sent it sailing off the ledge. The ram barely stopped himself at the brink as the bear plunged out of view. Then, Arax whirled to face her, murderous yellow eyes settling on the talisman around Abeke's neck. With a bellow that shook the mountain, the great beast charged straight toward her. Moving fluidly, Abeke sprang to one side, then to the other, but Arax tracked her evasions perfectly. Abeke found her back to the void as the ram closed in, horns lowered to strike. Roaring with inhuman volume, the bearded man ran forward, wrapped his brawny arms around one of Arax's hind legs, and grabbed hold of it. Skidding to a stop, Arax tried to buck and turn, but the man kept the giant hoof off the ground, his own legs churning forward. Teeth flashing, Briggan attacked another leg. Shrieking, Essex dove at Arax's eyes, talons raking viciously. The huge ram hopped and teetered. With a scream and a huge heave, the bearded man pivoted his body and launched Arax over the side. The big man fell to his knees as the ram plunged out of sight, following the bear to the valley floor. Abeke was dumbfounded. Not only had this stranger managed to defeat a great beast, he'd just saved her life. He looked her way, panting. You okay, girl?" he asked, holding out a hand to her. Before Abeke could respond, Zarif lunged forward and stabbed the big man through the back. Abeke screamed, putting a hand to her mouth. The big man pawed weakly at the blade protruding from his chest. The green cloak with the otter arrived at his side a second later, slashing at Zarif with his sword, but Zarif dodged away, leaving his own sword where it was. Abeke could hardly believe her eyes. This man, her enemy, had saved her life, only to be rewarded by treachery.
A stab in the back, the lowest blow one could deliver. As Abeke drew nearer to her rescuer, Zarif ran to Shane, picking him up. The tall green cloak got tangled up with an Amayan fighter. The woman's viper struck at him from behind, but the green cloak's otter bit it just below the head. Though the snake thrashed, the otter refused to let go. A moment later, the tall man clubbed his opponent with the hilt of his sword, knocking her unconscious. Zarif and the others fled up the rock-strewn slope. He carried Shane over his shoulder, with Shane's saber in his hand. Zarif looked back at Abeke, his eyes frantic.
"Hurry, this way!"
Abeke shook her head with a strangely calm certainty.
"We're over. I'm not on your side, Zarif."
At first, Zarif looked stunned. Then his eyes became cold and furious. His jackal was with him, uninjured, but Shane's wolverine was limping. Some other survivors had joined them, but they were battered and beaten. All but one lacked their animals. Zarif was out of allies. Abeke set an arrow to the string of her bow.
"Go, or arrows start flying."
After one last withering glare, Zarif turned and started up the mountainside at inhuman speed. The tall green cloak turned to Abeke. "You have the talisman?" he asked. She took her arrow from the string and fingered the granite ram.
"Yes."
"And you're with us now?"
"If you want me."
The green cloak gave a curt nod. "We want you, and we need you. I'm Tariq." Tariq moved to the side of the fallen bearded man. The Zhongese girl knelt next to him, as did a smaller balding man with a raccoon. Ji sniffed the wound where the sword protruded.
"Heal him,"
the girl insisted to her panda.
"That's what you do, right? Or help me heal him. What should I do?"
"Not all wounds can be healed,"
the bearded man gasped.
"That ram got jewels, but not before my bear gave me one last burst of strength. I've never lifted half so much weight."
Ji licked the girl, who wept openly.
"Save him," she repeated in soft sobs.
The bearded man held the hand of the balding one.
"You were the best company a man could ask for, Monty,"
he said, his voice falling to little more than a whisper.
"A real friend."
He took a jagged breath.
"Don't forget to tell folks I threw a great beast off a cliff."
"There will be stories and songs,"
Monty promised.
"Sorry to leave you early."
"I'll be along by and by,"
the balding man said, tears falling down his cheeks. The bearded man looked up at Tariq. As he wheezed, blood dribbled from his lips into his beard.
"If it can be managed, dispose of me in a green cloak."
"Nothing would be more fitting,"
Tariq said. The bearded man tilted his head back and closed his eyes. Monty leaned close, whispering to him. The bearded man's chest kept hitching in gurgling spasms, then stopped.
"I can't believe he killed a great beast,"
the boy with the wolf said numbly.
"Arax is not dead," Tariq said. "It would take more than a fall, even such a high one. The great beasts have too much life in them. Still, if we hurry, we might get away."
Though his tone was practical, Abeke thought the man looked very tired and very sad. Monty raised his head.
"Barlow's gone. I'd rather not leave him here." "The trick will be getting him to the horses," Tariq said. "We'll manage it."
Uraza snarled in agreement.
"What if they try to ambush us?"
the boy with the wolf asked. Tariq's expression darkened, and he stroked the hilt of his sword.
"I honestly hope they do."
Chapter 18. The Fallen. Connor leaned against the highest parapet on Sunset Tower, looking west, a light breeze ruffling his hair. The tower provided a lofty vantage point, but the mountains where they had confronted Arax were too far away to see. Briggan sat beside him, nuzzling his hand. They had made it back to Sunset Tower yesterday afternoon. The group had travelled quickly, chased by the constant worry that Arax might catch up with them, or that Zarif might stage an ambush. But nobody had troubled them. Barlow now rested below the surface of a lovely meadow, wrapped in Tariq's cloak. Monty had travelled with them back to Sunset Tower, determined to renew his vows. He hadn't spoken nearly as much on the way back as he had on the way out. Connor tried not to dwell on certain thoughts. He tried not to picture Barlow or Jules. He tried not to imagine how he would feel if something happened to Briggan. He tried not to guess at all the danger awaiting them and the other friends he might lose along the way. Connor stroked the thick fur on the back of Briggan's neck. I can't believe we're back here. It hasn't been that long, really, but it feels like a lifetime. The wolf licked his palm. Briggan had only started licking him like that since the battle on the cliff. Connor knelt down and stroked his wolf with both hands. "Be patient with me," Connor said. "I'll practice with that axe. I stayed alive, and I distracted some of our enemies, but I can do better. Next time you won't have to come rescue me so much." Briggan nuzzled Connor's forearm. "That tickles." The wolf nudged him with his nose. "What are you doing, boy?" Briggan stared at him intently. "Oh," Connor realized. "What do I do?" He had seen the others hold out their arms, so he tried that. With a flash, Briggan became a tattoo on the back of his forearm. The image burned for a moment, as if his arm had brushed against something scalding. But the searing pain faded quickly. "I saw that," said a voice from behind him. Connor turned to find Roland coming through the door to the top of the tower, his bandaged arm hanging in a sling. Maylin and Abeke were with him, wearing their green cloaks. "How long have you been doing that?" Roland asked. "Were you hiding it to spare my feelings? I don't need pity." "First time," Connor said, showing him the mark. "Really?" "Good job," Maylin said. "Thanks," Connor replied, feeling shy. Direct conversation with Maylin tended to fluster him. She was just so incredible and hard to figure out. "I don't think Briggan wanted to become dormant while we were out in the open. My guess is he feels safer here." "I wonder if Essex will ever feel safe," Roland said. "Give it time," Abeke recommended. "Where is she?" Connor asked. Roland squinted at the sky. "Where she always is, flying around. She likes it when I let her do her own thing. I can respect that." "She's probably mad because you won't become a green cloak," Connor said. "No," Roland shook his head. "I think she understands. Don't take it the wrong way. I respect you three for joining, I really do, especially you, Abeke. You've been through so much. But I'm just not sure yet if it's for me, taking official vows and all that. I'm not going anywhere. I'll still help out. And who knows, maybe eventually I'll wear the costume."
"Now that we made it back here, what comes next?" Maylin asked.
"I guess we train," Connor said. "We try to be worthy of our animals, and we find the rest of the talismans. At least, that's my plan." "Have you dreamed about any new animals lately?" Roland asked lightly. Glancing down at his mark, Connor turned away, gazing out at the countryside. "I think we've earned a break." "You didn't answer the question," Roland pointed out. Connor looked down. "Fine. I haven't mentioned this to Olven yet, or Lenori either, although she gave me a funny look this morning. I don't want to worry anybody, and I don't want to mess up our time to relax, but starting a few days ago, I've had these nightmares about a boar." Chapter 19. The Return. Oceans away, on the far side of Erdos, under a black, impenetrable sky, warm rain drenched a large, earthen mound on a barren prairie. Blazing strands of lightning zigzagged across the night, offering brilliant glimpses of the cloud ceiling. In rolling bursts, the roar and crackle of thunder drowned out the patter of the raindrops.
The searing flashes of light revealed hundreds of wombats, perhaps thousands, digging along the edge of the muddy mound, like an army of ants working on their nest. Heedless of the tumultuous storm, they burrowed urgently, paws bleeding. A lone figure strolled among them, watching them dig in the flickering glare of the lightning. They were close. He could sense it. In one hand, he held the crude key, heavy and carved with animal faces. As promised, it had finally been delivered to him. Years of work would culminate tonight. The hair was standing up on his neck, on his arms. The air hummed. He took several shuffling steps, then crouched low, put down the key, and placed his hands over his ears. The lightning struck a short stone's throw away, blasting wombats into the air. The thunder was deafening, even with his ears covered. He felt the shock through the ground. The muscles in his legs clenched painfully, but the jolt failed to knock him over. The next electric flash revealed at least a dozen dead wombats off to his left. The others kept tunneling industriously. It wasn't normal behavior for the animals, but these were not normal wombats. They were in thrall to the presence beneath the mound. He served the same presence, but his devotion was different. At least, that's what he told himself. The figure picked up the key and stood up as the storm raged on. He paced around and around the embankment, the muddy ground sucking at his every step. Eventually, a flash revealed that the wombats had abandoned their duties and massed on one side of the mound. The figure hastened to that side. As he drew closer, he didn't need lightning to guide him. The key seemed magnetized, drawn toward its destination by an invisible force. A sharp strobe of lightning revealed the gap in the side of the mound. The wombats hung back reverently. The figure entered the gap and splashed down to his knees as the rain poured down on him. Holding his breath, the figure plunged the key into the freshly unearthed socket. There came a rumbling, but not of thunder. A tremor rattled from below. He felt it before he heard it, but soon it was as loud as a roar. The next dazzling blaze of lightning showed the side of the hill tearing asunder. An immense, serpentine form arose. Its hood spread, its tongue flicking into the air. Unsure whether he would live or die, the figure bowed down. If his time had come, at least he had accomplished his aim. He had served the presence well. Garethon was free.